So I thought I'll again keep this as interactive and share a little bit about what we do at Unitus Seed Fund. Given that we are very active in the education space, I'll give you a few examples of the types of companies we've invested in, and then open it up and feel free to ask, sort of do almost like an AMA and ask me anything as an investor, and I'm most happy to answer those questions. So very quickly, my name is Srikrishna. I'm a partner with a fund called Unitus. We are a seed stage fund. We typically invest in the order of anywhere from ₹1 crore or ₹1.5 crore, going all the way up to maybe 3 crores or so, into startups that are serving the masses or serving large numbers of low-income populations. So that's really our investing specialty. We come into companies when there's some pilot in place, a proof of concept that's happened. There's some validation or demonstration that this is not just an idea, but there is at least one customer that's willing to pay for the product or the service that they're offering. So that's the stage that we come in at. So usually the entrepreneur by that time would have either self-funded it or raised some bit of capital, but more importantly has run a pilot and demonstrated some aspects of whatever the idea is, but knowing fully well that there's still a lot more experimentation that needs to be done before they could be scaling up. So our capital that we put in as a seed fund is more about getting to replicability, and it's not so much about growing rapidly. We work closely with companies then to help them as they go through the process of getting to that replicability, and then help them raise the next round of capital and go on from there. We are a fairly active investor in education. We've made 4 or 5 investments. One of our earliest investments in education was a company called Hippocampus. Hippocampus runs kindergartens in villages. Same quality of education that a Kidsy or a Eurokids would give you, but they do it at a price point of under 300 rupees per month per child. They operate in around close to 300 centers just in Karnataka alone. A center will usually have around 60 kids. By the time they get to around 45 kids in the center is actually profitable. So 75% of their centers are profitable at the center level. Obviously, corporate level break-even will take some more time. They find a woman from the same village or a neighboring village, train her to be a teacher on the content and the pedagogy, and then she's responsible for running the center. Hippocampus provides the content, the curriculum, helps them with the infrastructure, and so all these centers are owned and operated. So we made the seed investment in Hippocampus. We put in around 60 lakhs in 2012, 2013. And last year they raised their Series B round of $2.5 million, which was led by Asian Development Bank. And they're now starting to, obviously, they've figured out the model quite a bit. 300 centers is not a small number, although they're only in one state. They're now expanding into Maharashtra and other regions as well. They operate in villages where the population is anywhere from 5,000 to 15,000 people, but they're also now starting to look at semi-urban locations as well. So clearly, like we were saying, this is about education entrepreneurship and not ed tech. I think the only technology that Hippocampus will use will probably be a light bulb in their classrooms. There's really no other technology that exists. But what's happened though is that technology has helped them to run an efficient business and do so at scale. Today with internet penetration and with mobile penetration, you're able to run a scale business of 300 kindergarten centers and do so efficiently. You're able to track progress of children. You're able to track if teachers are coming on time and all of those things, right? The focus is really otherwise just education that's delivered in the traditional sense, but the advantage they have is obviously on the curriculum. The focus is on English and mathematics, and the problem that they are solving is that today in India there's a huge disparity in the grade level learning. So a child that's in grade 7 is really only at the grade 2 learning level, and that's the problem that they're really trying to solve. So that's about Hippocampus. We've invested in another company called iStar, which in some ways is similar to Rajesh's business of FACE. iStar is solving the problem that only 26% of India's college graduates are actually employable. So iStar works with Tier 2 and Tier 3 degree colleges, focusing largely on BCom and BBM streams, and helps students, works with students through the 3 years of college to make them more employable and job ready. By providing them with training inputs on basic things like Tally, Excel, how do I face an interview, what are the things I need to know about the BFSI sector that will actually make me more aware of the industry. So it's things like that, and then they help students get a job at the end of as they graduate from college. So that's really what iStar does. Lab in App is one more of our investments. You heard Pawan talk about it. So that's one more. And we've invested in two more education companies. We've invested in a company called Curiosity. Curiosity sells science kits into schools. So essentially these are all curriculum aligned kits. They take a textbook at the start of the academic year, understand all the concepts that are in the textbook, and then build science kits which help enhance the learning outcome or help students learn the concepts that are in the textbook better. One of the interesting aspects of how and why Curiosity has succeeded, they're in over 90 schools now in Karnataka and in Maharashtra as well. The kits are priced at a very, very affordable price. So the big chunk of the schools that Curiosity sells into are what's called as the APS segment, or the affordable private schools, where the fee point is typically anywhere from 500 rupees a month all the way up to maybe 1200 or so. And the kits are priced at 40 rupees per kit per child, and every child actually gets to take a kit home. And the pricing will obviously vary on whether it's a group of children doing the activity or one. But the interesting part, and I think one of the reasons why they believe they have succeeded, is that they've eliminated a lot of friction for the teacher. And as a consequence for the school as well. So there's a very high repeat. I mean, like we were saying earlier, schools constantly get bombarded with people coming and selling, either content or accessories or whatever that be. And all of these, I think one needs to keep in mind, is a drain on the school management and the ability, when I say management, the principal and the teachers, not so much the trustees, to be able to actually roll this out and run it and allow for it to get rolled out, stream in a sort of as frictionless as possible. By actually aligning everything to the curriculum and by giving these kits in a periodic way, and they've got a very good sort of logistics and a supply chain element in place. So every quarter the kits are shipped ahead of time. The teacher knows exactly which kit needs to be opened out for which experiment, and it's all sequenced out in the way that the teacher would be teaching using the textbook. And that's actually helped them in a big way, because they're able to find adoption very high. Both teachers and the school principals also then willing to actually take on the kits year after year. And the interesting part is, given that every child gets to take a kit home, at the start of the next academic year, you will have to necessarily order for fresh kits. So effectively thereby building an annuity business as well. So that's Curiosity. And then we've got another investment in a company called QLearn. QLearn works with home-based math tutors. If you go into any community in India, be it a high-income society or a low-income community, there's always an auntie or a didi or sometimes a bhaiya who's doing math tuitions at home. They're not teachers, but they're doing math tuitions. So what QLearn does is provides them, essentially it's a micro-franchise type of an approach. So what QLearn does is provides them with content, either paper pencil based content or tablet based content, and helps. The tutors are responsible for getting the children, and they use the QLearn content to deliver a superior quality tutoring experience and content. So those are the investments we've made in education. And then one other interesting investment I'll talk about, which is at the intersection of education and healthcare, but I think more education, is a company called Address Health. Address Health is in the business of providing school health checkups. For as low as 100 rupees per year, they will come and deliver a comprehensive health checkup in your school for the entire school. And in the process, what they're doing is collecting a lot of data about child health, which today doesn't exist in India and is a large problem, given lifestyle diseases starting to hit at much younger ages as well for kids. They're collecting a lot of data, and they're also solving a lot of problems in the sense that there have been a lot of situations where they've detected abnormalities or anomalies with children, and early detection has actually helped prevent fatality in many situations, or even get children cured. What they do is, doing this through schools is a very interesting customer acquisition mechanism for Address Health, because they come into the school and run the school health checkup, and if they find that children need follow-ups, then they're also running clinics within schools as well. And schools are happy to actually have someone run clinics within the school, because it's additional revenue for them. So that's another company that we've invested in. So that was just to give you a quick sense of the types of companies. Fundamentally, I'll give a few things on what is it that we look for in all of these companies, and particularly in education as well, and then perhaps open it up to questions. What we're really betting on when we evaluate companies as a seed fund is, of course, what has the entrepreneur or the promoter demonstrated up until this point. And even if it's a pilot that you've been doing for 3 or 4 months, really what have you demonstrated or what have you shown that's telling us that yes, you are on your way to building a deep understanding of whatever is it that you're doing, and more importantly, what are things that have gone wrong in the process of as you're running the pilot. A lot of times we find entrepreneurs, especially early stage entrepreneurs, coming to us and saying, when we ask them, hey, what are things that haven't worked? No, everything's gone really well. That's actually not the answer that we want to hear. It's very important to understand what's gone wrong and then what have you learned from that and change things around, because clearly we know that there's a lot of experimentation that needs to be done and you couldn't have probably cracked it in the first shot itself. I think that's one. The second that we are very, very keen to understand and focus on is unit economics, around fundamentally understanding what is the unit of whatever is the business that you're doing and what do the economics of that look like right now and what do they look like as you start to scale and progress. So that, not to say that you need to be making money right away, but again at the same time not to say that you need to be bleeding money, but at least understanding really that, look, like take for example, with Hippocampus, it's the unit ends up really being on a per child basis. At what fee point and when will you actually start, when will at the center level or at the child level start to get profitable on a per child basis or on a per center basis, including all of the costs, and what does that look like? How much does it cost to acquire, convince a parent to put your child in a Hippocampus center as opposed to sending her to a government-run Balwadi or elsewhere? So ensuring that entrepreneurs are thinking really through very clearly as to what the unit economics is looking like right now and how that will change over a period of time, and what are the other factors that need to play a role as you build and scale the business. I think that's the other thing that we're very, very keen to understand. I think the third is getting a sense of what are you looking to do with the money that you're looking to raise, right? I mean, typically the capital that we provide is usually for 12 months or so, with some buffer for probably another 6 months, assuming that by that time you would have to raise more capital. Just making sure that one is very, very clear about what the capital is going to get used for and what is it that's going to get demonstrated with the capital over that period of time that will make the company interesting for the next round investor to actually put more money. Because I think one of the things as a venture investor for us is that once we've put money into a company, the clock starts ticking, right? I mean, it starts ticking for the entrepreneur, because ultimately we want an exit in 4, 5, 6, how many ever years that is. But we're not investing to just stay invested in the company. We're investing because after a point in time we do want to exit, and the only way the exit will happen will be that obviously the company needs to scale and grow, and eventually there will be a larger amount of capital that's coming into the company where another investor is putting it in, or the company gets acquired by someone else and thereby gives us an exit. And I think there's a nuance there that's important to highlight. I think a lot of entrepreneurs assume that raising money means success. I think those two are not connected at all. You could be easily building a phenomenally successful business with raising zero amount of external capital. Now, because what happens is, as an investor, when we're putting money into a startup, then we need to ensure that this is a scalable startup, and as a consequence, with scale is what will then give us the exits and the type of returns that we want. So I would urge all of us to think about that clearly, that do I really need to be raising a lot of capital, or I could just run the business just with its own internal accruals, or figuring out putting in a small amount of money to get things going, and then figuring out other ways of doing that. But I think that's critical, because in this entire wave and buzz of startups and everyone raising money, I feel somewhere that nuance has gotten lost, and everybody is trying to scramble to, hey, I want to pitch and I want to raise money. So it was actually nice to see not too many hands go up when Madan asked, how many people are looking to raise money. So maybe there is sense that's prevailing right now. Those would, I guess, be things that I'd highlight from an investor perspective, particularly I think around education. The challenges we've seen is there aren't that many investors that are actually putting money into education startups. I think everyone wants to chase the e-commerce wave, the cloud wave, the mobile internet wave. I believe that the reason why we are so actively involved in education is simply because there's such a large opportunity. There's enough people out there, and there could be a lot of very innovative products and services that could be catering to large segments and inherently have scale, because fundamentally with anything you do in India, it's a population of 1 billion people. We all know this. If you're able to scale, it can actually succeed. But I think that there's very few investors that are investing in education fund, and particularly in sort of brick and mortar operating business in education, there's hardly any investors. But I think it's changing. folks like us coming in and demonstrating that it's possible to actually, make money out of investing in education and be able to get some reasonable exits as well eventually is starting to get more and more people interested. Of course, the tilt still remains more on technology and ed tech, but I think overall I sense there are exciting times ahead, and we are always interested in education entrepreneurs who are reaching out to us and have great ideas that we could be backing. I'll sort of stop with that, open it up to questions, and like I said, feel free to ask me anything. Yes. Sorry, and quick introductions. Armugam, who's with TAI, is also with Unitus Seed Fund. He works out of Coimbatore for us and helps us find interesting entrepreneurs. So you can reach out either to him or to me.
In the education sector, the sales cycle is always a season-based. How do you look at the math when it comes to investing?
Yeah,
because we miss that academic or calendar year perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question. Sometimes we forget about that and we look at the dashboard of a company and we'll suddenly realize, oh my God, for 3 months there's no cash coming in, what went wrong? And then you realize, I think it comes with the realization that if you're investing in education, you just have to be alive at that. But what's more important, I think, there to focus on really is ensuring that you're able to collect on time more than anything else. Because allowing a receivables issue to mount is a far greater problem, I would think, than the cyclical aspect, because I think people are used to this, that it's only 9 months in a year or 10 months in a year where revenues will come in. But figuring out that as long as you've got collections in place, you can tide over those 3 or 4 months. It doesn't bother investors that much. I mean, it doesn't bother investors that understand the sector. I mean, if it's a new investor, they'll probably, they may not be the one you should be talking to if they don't have an understanding of the sector. But I would say that, and I think the other related to that ends up being the whole B2C or B2B2C type of approach, right? I think all of the companies we've invested in so far are not dealing with the end consumer. They're actually only doing it through schools or colleges. And that has some advantages, but also has some disadvantages. But obviously in today's market, and particularly in India, it's extremely expensive to be running a B2C business and trying to acquire individual customers. I mean, there are ways to do it. There are companies that are scaling, but it is expensive. And particularly for a startup, we've found that that remains a big challenge. Whereas if you're trying to sell through the school or through a college, you are able to acquire a larger number of consumers or customers in one shot. It has some advantages of doing that. Yes.
My question ties in right from where you just left off. You say that you've invested mostly in B2B and B2B2C businesses. Do any of the companies in your portfolio think of B2B or B2B2C as an intermediary step to a B2C future? And how does the company think about that roadmap, and how do you as an investor think about that kind of vision and building a company that is able to do both? Because Madan mentioned also earlier that the DNA of a company that's B2B is very different from a DNA of a company that's B2C.
I'll use Curiosity as an example, right? They sell science kits, and they've chosen the approach. I mean, even though at the end of it, they sell to the school, and eventually every child gets a kit. So in that sense, it's effectively still B2C. But they've chosen this approach because otherwise, if they were, they would go crazy trying to actually sell one by one to a child, right? But eventually, the thinking is that once you've got this channel going, and you've got the customer, you could now start to sell other products, maybe even without the school. Like if they are starting to work on a tablet-based math offering, so that could go direct because the child now knows you as a brand, the parent knows you as well, and might be willing to try. So it's early days in startups, honestly, to sort of give you a firm answer for what that looks like. I agree the DNA does play a role, but I think even with the training business, for example, I mean, fundamentally, iStar's success ultimately is whether that student is able to get a job or not, right? So the ultimate beneficiary of the training that iStar provides is the end student. They're using the school as a channel because it does two things. One, it obviously helps them acquire, because when iStar sells, they actually sell to an entire school or an entire classroom. So it does two things. One, it minimizes the sales effort as opposed to going one by one. The second is there is a vested interest for the college to sign them up, because the more number of students that get placed, the college starts to look better and is able to attract better quality students as well. So I think that's how it's played out. So honestly, I don't have a straight answer to your question. I don't know, Madan, how does that DNA thing play out when you're doing both effectively, right? Your long-term vision is, yeah, I do want to do B2C, but you'll have to go the initial why. I think that transition is sort of, I don't know if it's apparent.
Yeah, not many have done that. The only thing is that you have to be conscious about it and know that the skill sets will change as you do the transition. Right? You can't, for example, put the head of sales of B2B to say now you do B2C as well. That ain't going to work. So if it is a thought through transition with all the necessary skills changing, then it'll work.
So it's fundamentally people are what they are, right? They can't change suddenly. It's the point, all of us. So the second enterprise that I'm talking about, Chalk Street, is an out and out B2C. And I don't have much of a say at all on as to what even happens there. They, without even telling me, change the entire color scheme from blue to green. The app today is green. I didn't even know. 1 week I don't check my app and suddenly like, when did you guys change it? That's how disconnected that business is. While I still own strategy, everything, but my other co-founder is what runs the whole thing. He is still a B2C guy. I cannot start thinking B2C out of nowhere. Probably I have to go through a 3-year don't think anything phase and then probably come back and maybe do that possibly. But
I think a lot of times what also plays a role is ultimately revenues that come in, right? And in some cases you could argue that maybe easier to do that with B2B because you're getting larger volumes than trying to sort of stretch yourself thin trying to do B2C. That plays a role as well. Yes. More questions? Yes.
So you said like Unitus started investing in startups. Investors who follow for all the startups.
So the question is there a particular thesis that we apply as opposed to with education in particular? I think with us, some of it is coming with the understanding that inherently education business will take a little longer to scale than, let's say, someone building an online business that's dependent on clicks, which you could acquire a large number of customers overnight. I mean, we know, for example, Hippocampus, which runs kindergartens, is almost like building an infrastructure business, right? And it will take longer time. So I think that's one understanding that we come with, that some of these businesses inherently are longer gestation. I think that's one. But to your point on is there a thesis that we apply to education startups versus other? I think the lens varies, but some of the fundamental parameters of how we evaluate an entrepreneur doesn't change, irrespective of whether an entrepreneur is building an education business or building something in, let's say, transportation. The parameters with which we are evaluating an entrepreneur doesn't change, but obviously if someone has experience in that's relevant, and that plays a role clearly, right? Although again I would argue that I think none of the entrepreneurs except the entrepreneur who runs QLearn, Manan, he actually started an IIT entrance exam coaching business, which he sold and then started doing QLearn, which is focused on math. And he's also he's the author of Pearson's best-selling IIT entrance math exam book. So he's very passionate about education. But Umesh was at Infosys before he started Hippocampus. The guys that started Curiosity were in Wipro and Sasken. So they came with a lot of, even Sarga and Sriram who started iStar were really passionate about training and wanted to focus on this segment, but really didn't come with any education business experience. So I would argue that I think it's really, if that's there and that understanding is there, that's a plus, but we don't necessarily look for whether someone's had education experience or not, but we look for what's the kind of business experience or entrepreneurial experience that a person has had before starting something up. I think that plays a role. I'm still trying to sort of think about, this is an interesting question, I haven't thought about it, and I'm just wondering whether there's something different that we apply from a thesis standpoint. I'll have to think some more. I don't actually have an answer. Yes.
Do you look at the whole regulatory angle when you look at any company? Let's say, because education is still largely regulated in our country.
Yeah, it plays a role. So if you'll realize that we've actually not invested in any schools businesses as such, because that space is regulated. Most of what we have done has either been in services or after school or in pre-K, I mean in kindergarten or in post-college vocational. There are investors that have invested in school businesses as well. There are structures that play out. We've just not done that, but I sense that Hippocampus will go that direction very soon, right? You've got kids who have gone through 3 years of kindergarten. You don't want to let go of them now when they're in school. So they're figuring out some ways, but it does play a role, but it's not something that's making us say we're not going to invest in the sector. And I think that's true with most investors. I think it comes with, like I said, it comes with the understanding of the space that yes, there are these regulatory frameworks that one would have to work with, where it doesn't, it's not like defense or something where we're saying we're not going to invest here. That's how I would put it.